when Nathaniel Ward, the son of a poor Ohio auto mechanic turned San Francisco tech mogul, walked into a glass-enclosed meeting room on the 47th floor, he thought he was signing the deal of the century. The blue and white waves of the Pacific rolled past the panoramic windows. The taste of a perfect espresso kept his pulse steady. But instead of champagne, there was a folder with the Federal Bureau of Investigation logo on the table, and his CFO, Marcos, his former best friend, didn't look up. "We're having a raid today," the lawyer whispered. The words shattered the silence like gravel under a wheel as a child. Nathaniel felt a lump of metal gather in his throat. It was the same taste he had had when his father had lost his garage to debt, and he had vowed never again to let the world dictate who he would be. "Fake," he said. "Our code is clean." But agents appeared at the door. Devices, boxes, sealed envelopes. The cameras were already watching below, the news feeds exploding with headlines about data manipulation, government collusion, a breakthrough but toxic AI. Anna, their ex-wife and the mother of their son, flashed on the phone screen. "Nate, tell me it wasn't you." Her voice was as thin as ice in March. He closed his eyes. "I was protecting users. I was building something that would save them from chaos," he said, as if justifying himself to himself. As the agents removed the servers, Nathaniel saw Marcos clench his fists, not out of fear, but out of relief. "You knew?" he said quietly. "I knew it would be better this way," the man replied, and for the first time met his gaze, cold as steel. It was enough for the familiar course of life to crumble like ashes in the wind. That evening the city was lit up with colorful bridges, but it seemed to him that the light was hitting black ice. He drove along the night highway 101 without music, listening to the left-turn signal clicking, torn, nervous, like a heart. In the rearview mirror, the headlines caught up with him. Treason, corruption, the end of an empire. If the truth kills business, maybe it wasn't business, but an idol, he thought. And, unable to bear it, he shouted into the empty salon. "What have you done to my life?" The wind from the ocean responded with a salty, bitter taste. And deep down, the silence in which the most dangerous decisions are born. Trying to stop the bleeding only opened an artery. The lawyers advised silence. The PR team cried live. "America needs a confession," they said. But America doesn't like a confession. It loves a story with a clear antagonist. And when Marcos went on TV with repentance and concern for users, the world got a simple plot. A genius who crossed the line and a friend who saved the company from a tyrant. Investors pressed, the government demanded servers, journalists dug into his past. An article appeared about secret memoranda with the Defense Department 3 years ago, when their AI could see the crumbs of a crime before they turned into an avalanche. "You sold fear," Anna snapped when he came to see her son. "I sold the chance to get ahead of the darkness," he replied, understanding how helpless big words sound when your trust is taken away. His son was silently building a spaceship out of Legos, and Nathaniel suddenly saw himself in the structure. Shiny pieces assembled on a fragile frame. Touch the wrong place, and everything would fall apart. The lawyer had found a loophole in the old contracts. A small addendum that Marcos had pushed through the board of directors that transferred control of critical infrastructure in the event of a regulatory emergency. Today was the day. "You signed it, Nate," she said. "I confided in a friend," he smiled wearily. Another shadow was waiting for him in the office. A Texas investigator showed him copies of payment slips that led to pseudo-funds that had spent hours funneling data through dark webs. "Someone benefited from making you look like a monster," he said. "Who?" "Someone who calls it a rescue." That evening the company officially suspended him. The stock fell, the lines of credit closed. Partners refused to shake hands, as if they were a sick hand. Posters appeared under the doors of the house. "Don't trade your soul for data." Nathaniel came closer and read his own biography in someone else's letters. What was I really building, he asked himself. The answer came at the darkest moment. He had lost not only his reputation, but also the ability to believe that his path was righteous. And then something inside him cracked. Not pride, but deeper, a bone of self-confidence. The world was no longer what it seemed. Salvation came not from skyscrapers, but from an old Greyhound bus and the smell of coffee in a roadside diner on the outskirts of Fresno. There he met Dr. Irene Koval. a woman who had once been turned away from his lab because her ideas were too academic. She recognized him from the news, brought him a pie, and said, "Every system has a shadow. You forgot to measure it." They talked until dawn. Irene said she had worked for 3 years to prove that their AI had been deliberately trained on mixed sets that skewed the results toward threat when a government contract was on the line. It's not just a mistake. It's a signature, a mathematical accent. It's invisible to journalists, but it screams to the scientist, she whispered, pointing to the graphs and marginalia. Who did it? Someone who had access to the compilation of the sets. That is, a very small circle. Irene gave him a flash drive with forbidden knowledge, logs that proved the weight changes had been made from the accounts of shell contractors linked to a hedge fund in which Marcos had a stake. You could destroy yourself if you go down this path, she warned. I'm already destroyed, he smiled without joy. He asked to meet with Anna. I lost my way. I wanted to build a lighthouse, but I became a spotlight for those who buy darkness wholesale, he said. She stared for a long time, then sighed. The truth is not just what the charts show. It's also what you're willing to pay for it. His son looked up from his new ship and handed him a small part. Dad, it won't fly without this. It was both absurd and sacred. Late at night, Irene sent him the last file, an internal memorandum that did not exist, a draft with Marcos's edits. It was worded cynically and clearly. Increase threat perception during negotiations with the government. Adjust allocations to demonstrate a higher useful signal. In the left margin, a note. NV agreed verbally. Nathaniel made no such notes, but his silence then was indeed consent. His brain buzzed. It was not only the traitor who was to blame, his pride, which provided the tools for the betrayal, was also to blame. The revelation turned the world upside down. His downfall was built on a bluff, but the foundation was his own blindness. The choice came like a storm from the desert, hot, sharp, with no chance of waiting it out. You could agree to give up the patents, disappear, let the story freeze in the form someone needed. Or go for it all, confess your own, expose someone else's, risk your freedom, money, the right to see your son, but return the meaning. All or nothing, he repeated, pressing start broadcast. He didn't cry or play. He just told. About his father's garage, which smelled of grease and honesty. About the day they signed the first contract, and he thought that the truth is what works. About Marcos, the friend with whom they once shared one burger for two. About Irene's file, pounding in his pocket like a heart. I let fear drive. It's my fault. But I didn't change the scales. Those who were afraid not of the darkness, but of the light of control did it. He laid out the logs, the memorandum, the names of the contractors. He named the hedge fund. And so, he added, my sin is pride. I believed that the end would justify the method. It burned me. An hour later, the same agents came to Marcos's office. 2 hours later, journalists discovered the fund's connections to political super PACs. 3 hours later, Irene was testifying under oath. In the courtroom, Anna shook his hand. You didn't do this for yourself, she said. Will you ever teach your son how to build ships without unnecessary details? He nodded. That evening, he received a call from the bank. Your accounts are frozen for another 6 months. I understand, he replied, and felt a strange lightness, as if after a negotiated pain. The climax had no triumph, only an honest silence in which words fall into place. He had lost most of his fortune. The court had ordered him to sell his shares and cover investors' losses. He emerged from the building unguarded, wearing a gray jacket, and for the first time in years looked up at the sky not from the roof of a skyscraper, but from ground level. All or nothing, he whispered. I chose everything that leaves something in me. A year had passed. Nathaniel lived in a house by the ocean that had once seemed too modest for his name. He taught data ethics at a local college and built ships with his son, not Legos, but wood now. The smell of pine and resin brought him back to his father's garage. On the wall hung a sheet of paper on which he had written 3 questions. Can you be rich and honest? Which is more important, truth or success? Can you redeem the past? The students argued, laughed, and got angry. He listened and gave no simple answers. One day Irene said, they call you a traitor, they call you a hero. What do you call yourself? He thought about it. A witness, he replied. A person who has been on both sides of the mirror, and knows that it is always a little crooked. He had not become poor. Royalties from old patents gave him a decent living, but he no longer measured his days by exchange rates. And when a new startup called him to head its ethics board, he set a condition: any algorithm, only with an open log of decisions, any contract, only after a public discussion of the risks. It will slow us down, the investors grumbled. It will save us, he replied. In the evening, his son brought him a black wooden part. Dad, this ship will fly further if you add it here. Nathaniel smiled. The truth is always a part in the right place. He went ashore. Gust,